Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. For any PNP program, and especially talking about OINP, Ontario Immigrant Human in Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, Human Capital Priority Stream. So, especially talking about that and the other PNP program as well. When you're applying, you need to show your intent of residing in that province. Okay, now everybody knows about it, right? So, but nobody knows what are the documents, how to show your intent. Okay. So in this video, I'm going to talk about that, and here is a list. And if you don't have any of these factors on your side, then there is another way of showing how you intend to live in that province. Okay, so let's start the video. First of all, you can, if you had an employment, previous or current, from Ontario, you need to declare it. If you have job offers, or if you applied for jobs, or you got an interview for a job in Ontario, you should nominate that. Now, many people living outside Canada, they get interview calls as well. I got interview calls as well while residing outside of Canada. Okay, so it is quite possible that you get an interview. Gaining a job offer is a different thing, right? But you can get interviews. Okay, so if you have any, if you gave any interview, you should nominate it. Okay, education in Ontario, volunteer work in Ontario. If you have ever done that, maybe on a can you do volunteer work on a visit visa? Do tell me in the comment section. Okay, if you're a temporary resident living in Canada, in Ontario, on a visit visa, can you do volunteer work? Okay, if you have that knowledge, then share it in the comment section. Lease agreement for a residence in Ontario, or if you own a property within that province. Okay, then if you have professional networks and affiliations, for example, I am a CMI UK qualified manager. Okay, and CMI has a relevant body in Canada. Okay, but for example, if that body was recognized by Ontario, that is my affiliation to that province. Okay, so I can share that with them. All right. Next up, family ties. Obviously, if you have any uncle, auntie, cousin, or whatever, you can share that. Social connections and personal relationships. If you have any friends, class fellows, maybe somebody from your town, maybe somebody who knows you, then mention that. Okay. Previous visits, if you had any previous visits to Ontario on any status, mention that. Okay, so if you don't have any of these things, then you need to provide a statement of intent that you intend to reside in Ontario. Now, what did I write in that? Obviously, I will not give you a specimen. I don't want anybody to copy these things. Then we're going to have dozen of applications with the same letter of intent, and I don't want anybody to get rejected based on that. Okay. So here are a few things that I wrote in my statement of intent. Maybe there were 2 paragraphs. I believe there were 2 paragraphs. Okay. So I talked about weather, that if we look at Alberta, if we look at Saskatchewan, their weather is very harsh. Ontario has mild weather as compared to these provinces. So I would prefer living in Ontario, which has a mild weather. Well, better weather is in Vancouver, in British Columbia, but this is the reason that I gave. Okay, and also I mentioned that I lived in London, okay, which is a massive metropolitan city, and it is quite similar to Ontario, to Toronto, because of the metropolitanism in it. Okay, because it's one of the most culturally rich cities in the world, London and Toronto. Okay, so there is similarity. So I mentioned that because I lived in London, weather was similar, cultural aspects were similar, so I'd have more advantages if I'd be living in Toronto. Okay, so this was something else I mentioned. Also, I had school buddies and ex-colleague in Toronto, so I mentioned that as well. Okay, next up, I've talked about my knock code and how corporate sales manager 0601 knock code is in demand for Ontario, and how the companies that I want to work in have their headquarters in Ontario. So these are the basic things that I talked about. And also I said that I don't want to live in a place which is not a big town. So I like living in metropolitan cities. I like living in big towns. So this is why, I mean, I would prefer living in the GTA region, right? So these are the few things that I mentioned. So you can mention statement of intent according to what your views are. Also, I talked about the research that I had conducted about the province, about Ontario, about GTA region, about Toronto city, right? So I talked about that research that I had conducted. Okay, so these are the few things that I wrote in my statement of purpose. So it was basically 2 paragraphs only. Okay, so based on that, obviously you can make up your story, which should be true to your case. Okay, do not copy anything what I said, but it should give you clarity that okay, these are the few things that I can talk about. Now, this is again not a legal advice. Neither of the videos that I make are legal advice because I'm not a consultant, right? So with these words, this is Alif Tikhar, and I'm hoping great things are coming your way.